Hi guys, welcome back to Foliage Loft. My name is Liam, and today we're going to talk about some great, inexpensive houseplants that have amazing variegation. So if you're new to plants, you may ask, what is variegation? So the answer is really simple. Variegation is simply the different zones of color that you may see on the leaves, stem, or fruits of a plant. So when you go shopping for a houseplant, you might notice that variegation is actually quite common in the stores, but that's because these plants are very appealing to gardeners and plant owners, and they've been propagating and growing these plants for many years, and now a lot of these indoor houseplants that do have variegation are quite common. So there are still some houseplants that are very rare and they're quite expensive. We're talking about hundreds if not thousands of dollars just for a small plant. You know, something like the popular Monstera albo comes to mind, and in my area these plants, for a pretty small plant, maybe with 3 or 4 leaves, right now they're going for about $700 to $800. But in this video, I want to talk about some of the variegated houseplants that you can find for cheap. I am going to touch on the price of each individual plant, but all of the plants in this video are less than $30. And if you guys find this video entertaining or informative, please hit the like button down below and subscribe to the channel. But enough with my rambling, let's get on to the plants. So the first plant in our list of cheap variegated plants is the Marble Queen Pothos. This plant is sometimes called the Devil's Ivy, and its botanical name is the Epipremnum aureum. Depending on how the light is hitting this plant, variegation can vary between kind of a creamy yellow color to almost a pure white. And as you can see in some of these shots that I'm overlaying, the great thing about this plant is that every single leaf has its own unique variegation and unique pattern. So you'll also see on my plant here that it has some half moon variegation as well, and that is when one half of the leaf is all green and then the other half has this really nice variegated color to it. So this plant that I have here is still fairly small. It only has about maybe 20 leaves in total, but every single leaf is unique and different, and every time a new leaf unfurls, it's like a surprise. You never really know what it's going to look like. And just like all the other plants in the Pothos family, this plant is super easy to take care of as well. These plants do really well in a wide variety of light and humidity conditions, and you definitely want to make sure the soil is almost completely dry before you water it again. Personally, I would fertilize it about once every 3 to 4 weeks in the summer, and then I totally back off fertilizing in the winter. There is one thing to note when you're taking care of this plant. If you do want to keep this variegated look and you want to have as many leaves as possible showing that really nice white color, you do want to make sure you give this plant a lot of light. If you put it into a dark corner in your home, it'll start to revert back to its green form, so you will lose that variegation. So just make sure you have it in a nice bright spot. And this list is all about cheap variegated plants, and this is definitely one of the cheaper ones you'll be able to find. I paid $10 for this one. A larger Marble Queen may cost a little bit more, but it still shouldn't break the bank. So that's the first plant for today, the Marble Queen Pothos. So next up on our list is the stunning Dracaena circulosa. So this plant has some common names as well. It also goes by the name Dracaena Florida Beauty, and it's also known as the Dracaena Gold Dust. And for all you wrestling fans, no, I'm not talking about that gold dust. So I'm sure you can obviously tell just by looking at this plant that the name gold dust comes from the beautiful variegation that this plant has to offer. And similar to the Marble Queen Pothos, this plant will continue to push out these leaves with this amazing variegation as long as it's receiving enough light. I really enjoy the contrast between the glossy green areas of the leaves with the creamy white color of the variegation. And I think the variegation pattern on this plant is kind of reminiscent of the stars in the night sky, which I think is a really unique look. So I'm obviously a pretty big plant nerd, but I'm also a little bit of a space nerd as well, so anything that reminds me of the night sky I really enjoy. There is actually a similar variant to this plant. It's called the Dracaena Milky Way, and that one has a kind of a band of variegation. It's like a kind of a creamy yellow color that runs down the middle of the leaf, and then the kind of speckled pattern is around it. So that one's also on my list. I'm gonna keep an eye out for that one to add it to the collection. And this plant is also pretty low maintenance too. I'd say the only thing you really wanna watch out for in the growing season, you definitely wanna keep the soil more on the moist side. Most Dracaenas do like to dry out, but this one in particular does like to stay a little bit more moist, especially in the summer. And because of that, I would definitely not put this plant in a terracotta pot. I would keep it in a plastic nursery pot or like a ceramic pot, just to make sure it doesn't dry out too quickly. And obviously the great thing about this plant, it's super cheap. So I bought this one for $5.49 at my local nursery. So it's a super affordable way to add a splash of color to your home. And that's the second plant on my list, the Dracaena circulosa. Next up on my list is one of the most aesthetic houseplants in my collection, the Hoya Crimson Princess. So one of the interesting things about variegation is that as a plant matures, the color of the leaves can actually change over time, and this Hoya Crimson Princess is a perfect example of this. The growth pattern of Hoyas can be quite different from most other houseplants. They tend to throw out these long tendrils or stems, and for quite some time the stem will actually just be completely bare. Until you'll start to see little buds starting to form and the leaves will slowly begin to emerge. The brand new leaves on this plant are this beautiful deep crimson color, which is where the name Crimson Princess comes from. And as the leaves age, they will just kind of fade to more of a kind of a soft pink color in the center with that dark green around the edge. And eventually they turn to a completely different color, which is this kind of creamy yellow, almost a white color in the center. And at any one time, this plant can be like 3 different colors, which is pretty neat. So you can definitely use this plant to add a splash of color to any room that you think might need it. And this plant will also flower as well, also adding to its appearance. And the flowers are usually kind of a pinkish white color. And the flowers can actually also smell like chocolate, which is a pretty neat bonus. This is the first and only Hoya in my collection so far, so I'm still getting used to this family of plants and learning how to take care of them. But so far I've figured out that they do really like to dry out. The soil should be completely dry before you water it again. So you can do what's called the taco test. So if you grab a leaf and you give it a little squeeze, if it's really easy to fold it, that means you need to water it. If the leaf still feels pretty rigid and it's kind of hard to squeeze, you should probably hold off. So I did water this plant recently and the leaves do still feel fairly rigid. So I know I'm probably gonna have to wait another week or 2 before I water this one again. And this is the most expensive plant on my list today. I think I got this one for $24.99, so it wasn't super expensive, but definitely affordable for sure. And that's the third plant on my list, the Hoya Crimson Princess. And the final plant on my list today is the Schefflera Arboricola, otherwise known as the dwarf umbrella tree. I'm sure just by looking at this plant, you can tell where the name umbrella tree comes from. It has these large fanning leaves that come out from these spokes from the main stem. And its unusual shaped leaves are just great to look at by themselves, but then when you add this variegation on top, I think it makes this plant really special. The variegation on this plant presents itself as both a lime green color as well as a golden yellow color, which you can see contrasts with the dark green color of the regular non-variegated Schefflera Arboricola. So you get these 3 colors on the leaves here, and I think the way that these colors fade into each other is really beautiful. It kind of reminds me of like a watercolor painting almost. And the new leaves on this plant, they just kind of come up as a regular kind of green color, and it does take a week or 2 for the variegation to really show through. So I do have a newish leaf. It started sprouting about 2 weeks ago. Now it's like almost full size, and you can see some of the variegation is just starting to come through on it. And this one here is a dwarf version of the Schefflera Arboricola, but it can still grow quite large. So indoors you can probably expect it to get at least 3 feet tall, maybe even a little bit bigger if it gets a lot of light. And this is just the dwarf version of the plant, so there is another version, the regular version, and that one can grow even larger. And these are also one of the few tree-like plants that can grow inside. Usually tree-like plants really need a lot of light, so they really only do well outside. There are a few other houseplants like the ficus family that grow well inside, but this is one of the few that will really take off indoors. And this is another super affordable plant, so I believe I bought this one for about $4.50. So a real bargain, especially for a plant of this size, and it can grow much larger. So if you're looking for something to brighten up your space with some color, but you don't want to spend a fortune, this is an awesome choice. And that's the last plant on my list of cheap variegated houseplants, the Schefflera Arboricola. So that's all I have for you today, guys. I hope you found this video informative, and hopefully I gave you guys some ideas for your houseplant collection. And thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. See ya.